Steve here. You ever see those huge, sudden moves in the market and wonder who's on the other side of that trade? Well, today we're going to talk about the big boys. We're talking about hedge funds.
And that's not just some clever line. It's actually the perfect way to think about them. Just like special forces, they're elite, they're incredibly well equipped, and they operate with a kind of precision and aggression that most of us just can't compete with.
All right, so what really makes these players so different? We're about to go inside that fortress. We're going to break down how they operate and, more importantly, why it matters to you and your trading.
Look, put it this way. Your typical retirement fund manager, they're playing checkers. Hedge funds, they're playing 3D chess. They've got more tools, way more leverage, and a mission that is just completely different from anything you're used to. So let's talk about what that mission really is.
Okay, this next idea, this is absolutely crucial. If you get this, you get the entire hedge fund game. It all boils down to one single concept, the relentless pursuit of absolute return.
So most of us, right? We're used to something called relative return. Think about your 401k. The manager's job is just to beat a benchmark, like the S&P 500. So if the market tanks 20% and your fund is only down 15%, guess what? They get a pat on the back. That's a win for them. But you still lost money. Hedge funds, totally different ballgame. Their goal is positive returns, period, no matter what.
The thing you've got to remember is this. For a hedge fund, the only benchmark that matters is zero. That's it. They get paid to make money. Whether the market is flying high, crashing and burning, or just chopping sideways, it doesn't matter. No excuses.
So how on earth do they pull that off? Well, while the buy and hold folks are glued to the news, sweating every headline, hedge funds are on the attack. They're using a full arsenal. I'm talking shorting stocks, using options to basically bet on volatility itself. They're using complex derivatives to literally turn market chaos into a paycheck.
So, what's the engine behind all this aggression? What fuels this hunt? It comes down to their famous or infamous fee structure, the 2 and 20. It's one of the most powerful incentive systems ever created in finance.
All right, first up is the 2. That's 2%. It's their annual management fee calculated on the total amount of money they're managing.
And that 2%, that's really just to keep the lights on. It pays for the supercomputers, the army of PhDs they hire, the fancy offices. It's the cost of doing business at this level.
But that's not the real motivator. The real juice is the 20%.
That's 20% of all profits they make. Think about that. That is the incentive. That's why they can afford to hire the absolute best talent and buy the fastest technology. Every single tick of profit matters because they get a huge piece of the action.
And that quote says it all, doesn't it? They aren't just investors, they are predators. This fee structure doesn't just encourage them to perform, it forces them to hunt. They're constantly scanning the markets for any weakness, any tiny edge that can exploit for a profit.
Okay, so let's bring this into the here and now. What does this battlefield look like today in the 2026 environment, and how are these predators adapting?
Well, one thing's for sure, the easy money days of the last decade, they are long gone. We're in a completely different world now. This is what you call a stock picker's market. And you know what? All this volatility and uncertainty, this is the perfect hunting ground for a hedge fund.
So, what's their playbook look like right now? Well, they're making huge discretionary macro bets. They're playing specific events like mergers or even bankruptcies. They're all over interest rate shifts and trying to get ahead of big changes in global trade. And of course, they're hedging against all the geopolitical chaos. See, they're not just buying stocks, they're making bets on the entire global economy.
So the next time you're looking at your screen and you see some wild, unexplained spike in oil or a currency that just drops off a cliff, remember what we've talked about. Chances are a hedge fund is the why behind that move.
Which brings us to the bottom line, right? Why should you care about any of this? Simple, because trading is a zero-sum game, and the first rule is to know your competition.
Because once you understand how these guys think, what drives them, and the strategies they use, everything changes. You stop fighting the tide. You start swimming with it. You start to see the bigger picture, and maybe, just maybe, you can anticipate what they're going to do next. Look, you and I, we can't join them. We don't have that kind of capital. But that doesn't mean we can't learn from them. So I'll leave you with this question. Can you start to trade like them? This is Steve. Know your competition. I'll see you at the open.